Carlos Frank Rodriguez.
Could you just tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, the was born in San Diego, California. My I am second of six. I'm 42 next month. I have an older brother who's 43. Um, my mother, she had my older brother when she was 15,
Mm-hmm.
me when she was 16. Um, Grew up in a very loving family with respect to my mother and her care. My father had me, he was a year older than my mother, so grew up in San Diego, Devadio, Logan Heights to be exact.
What were your dreams as a child?
You know, uh, and that'll fast forward to where I'm in life right now, but I really don't remember my dreams as a childhood. And I think that's indicative of some of the things that I'm processing right now in life that kind of led to us getting to really know each other and me being in this seat right now. So um, I've always had dreams from a young age. I just don't remember them starting in my childhood, if that makes any sense. And I think that's also coming from a family of hard workers, but I'm a first generation college student as well as all of my other siblings. So that dreaming to be something, dreaming to be a fighter pilot, dreaming to be a fireman was never there. Um, However, I did grow up without a TV, and I was a voracious reader from a very young age, kind of mandated by my mother, but we developed a fond love of reading. So I read far and wide, and I remember as a kid reading a lot of books on history, biographies. I was fascinated with Native American Indians. I think in my the way my mother tells the story is she took me to every library, public library within like a 20-mile radius, and I like tore through all those books. So I say that to say I didn't dream, but I had ambition to be the best I could be at whatever that was. And I feel that's what I've always strived for. It wasn't until my probably late 20s, mid to late 20s, that I call it now in retrospect, unbridled ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And it was then I picked up some pretty good mentors that they had their work cut out for them. But as I look back over the last decade or so, um, I'm glad I met them, and that has been key to going through life's ups and downs is just having those mentors in my corner. So
Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your relationship with your dad and how that relationship felt?
my my father came from a blue collar family. Um, he was from an old Mexican family in Logan Heights. They're still there. He, at a young age, started selling drugs, and he became a career criminal. I don't know if he's ever had a tax-paying job. In and out of the penal system, um, very involved in the street gangs there and some of the more organized crime. To this day, so we didn't have a relationship. My mother took us away. We moved to Colorado when I was about 6 because she didn't want us involved in that lifestyle. I respect her so much for that, but we never really talked about my father. She never said anything bad about him. Um, I think growing up, from the time I left, which I have very little memories of that life, to the time I moved to Colorado, and I remember I think I was a senior in high school, and I got a phone call from him, and it was I hadn't talked to the man in 10 plus years, so it was like, talking into a deadline. Uh, Typical questions. I don't know if he was just coming out or going into prison, but that's when he was at his, and like I said, if you're going to do something, be good at it. He was very good at what he did for a while. So I think, yeah, it's just a couple of questions. How you doing? Working out? So I responded, and that was it. I never heard from him again until I had joined the military and I was working in the intelligence community, actually on a counter narco program project, which had extreme conflict of interest, if you could imagine. And I had very high security clearance at the time, and it was just a different life of mine. So my brother called me, my older brother. He's a naval officer at this time, and when he calls me and he says, "Hey, our dad had a stroke. You probably need to come see him." And that's his. He knows what I'm involved in. He knows that I'm not going to go just out there and strike up a conversation with my father unless he's dying. That's how I took it. So even then, I was more career focused, and I said, and having a clearance, the my connection with my father was brought up in those interviews. And I'd always say, "You guys know more than me," you know. So I knew that I had another interview coming up. So I had him call the Red Cross, make an official memorandum, send it down to me. So it was on record that I went to go visit my father to bury him, and that's what I was thinking. The resilient bastard, when I got there, he, by this time, he was getting high on his own supply, right? Still running in the streets, but he was on his downward descent, if you will, to that lifestyle. So by the time I get there, which is about 48 hours after initial phone call, we know that he's going to recover. And so as I'm flying there, I'm flatlined on emotions. I mean, this is, at its basic, it's just filial obligation, and I'm going to go do my societal dues and bury my father. But and he had OD'd to make it even worse. So to make it, I get there. I don't know what type of emotions I'm going to get. My brother picks me up. He kind of tells me that, hey, he's recovered. He's walking with a limp, Or he's not walking, but he will be walking with a limp, but he's still in the hospital. Tomorrow they're transporting him to a rehabilitation center. So we drive from the airport to the hospital. As we're walking in, my brother walks in first, and we walk into your typical hospital room, and I see a older Mexican man in a gown, and my brother walks in and just says, "Hey, what's up?" My brother and him had a relationship that went back from my brother left when he was younger, 15, 16, to go live with him. So when I walked in, he recognized me, just like that, and didn't say a word. So I just sit down, and what do you say? And I see all his cards. His associates had just come in, and they were walking out, and we walked in. He's tatted all up, and I just think, these nurses, they got to live with this. So I say, don't say anything. I said, well, we'll figure, don't say anything. I'll see you tomorrow. And I had to leave like the following day. So the next day, I remember going to the rehabilitation center, and I'm sitting there on the foot of his bed, and he wants to talk and all of this, but I tell him, I'm in a bit of a pickle with respect to my profession and striking up a relationship with him. So I tell him, hey, I'm about to go on and he knows I'm in the military, he doesn't know what branch, doesn't know what I do. I said, I'm about to go on an 18-month deployment to Afghanistan. I said, when I get back, if you're not on drugs and you want to talk, let's talk. And he never quit. And so for me, as a son, I gave him that opportunity, to just, doesn't have to be all, if you want to strike a relationship, but it was, the drugs are powerful, you know, and um, so I think I'm at peace with it. I have no animosity towards him. I don't go through life thinking uh, about what I could have been had I had that utopian family structure. I will say that I had a stepfather come in my life, and whereas we never had discussions on the birds and the bees, there's no finer man with respect to work ethic and character that I look up to. Um, Hell, my mother was beautiful. He was punting outside of his coverage. He was, you know, it came with two kids. He took it.
Yeah.
And they're still together 40 some years later. So it all worked out. So that's why I say, um, didn't start, I come from a loving family. And my mother acknowledges the mistakes she made as a mother, trying to raise a family at 15. Um, she now has 6 successful children. Um, and that's good. So a little winded there, but that's my relationship with my father, if it makes sense and gives some type of clarity, insight.
What about the relationship with your mom and how that relationship felt?
It was very good. Um, I was kind of I was the prodigal son, and I don't know if it was from my, you know, somewhere along these life environments I established a touch of charisma and willingness to engage with people and just try like hell to get ahead. Um, my mother was always supportive, um, but she was very involved at this time with her church, and I think that was her going across the spectrum from raising herself to having a kid to needing some structure, having dropped out of 10th grade. So we went through that cycle of rigorous church, um, for about a decade and a half. And she adjusted her views as we got older. Very supportive to this day. And as we probably will get into some later questions, you know, as a son, as a mother with her first and second sons in the military as active deployers, I think between me and my older brother, we have 8 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, she became very good as a supporting mother, especially knowing what we were doing. She's seen us change from deployment 1 through deployment 8, and there's a lot of these stories out there of veterans dealing with PTSD, but it's also the families, you know. And as I look back in retrospect at what she had to endure to this day, there's still the after effects that the family deals with. So very loving, very supportive mother. Like I said, I couldn't have asked for finer parents with respect to character and example than my mother and stepfather. Mike.
What would you say are the biggest thing you've learned from your parents, from all three of them?
For my mother, it's to always have an open mind. It's to love. It's to, you know, own your mistakes. You know, there were 6 of us kids. She ran the home like she was a CEO. So I learned a lot of organization, um, even through as I traversed through life and my military assignments and professional, you know, what have you. She was always there to encourage me, you know, and just that is something that I pay back. You know, when I see someone that has the gumption the character, and I feel that she's instilled in me an innate knack to identify people that just need a couple of words of encouragement, you know. From my father, you know, again, it's kind of the silent monk, um, to just be very analytical before speaking, you know, judge people for what they are, you know, but to not judge them for perhaps who they are, but what they mean to you. You know, from him, it was just a hard work ethic. Um, and he was content. He's a man that's content, that never reached higher levels of wealth. So, you know, that's what I learned from him. From my father, I don't know if I learned. Well, heck, I did learn. I learned from my father that there's a genetic of addiction in me, you know, and this is a man that had so much potential. He was very good at what he did. Um, and granted, it wasn't, well, hell, some of it's legal now, you know, fast forward 20 years, 30 years, but he could have been anything he wanted to be had he not got caught up in drugs and alcohol. Um, so that's, to me, having gone through some alcohol issues, a very vivid reminder of what I can be. Any of us, for that matter.
Can you tell us about your first love and how that felt? And it's anything that you associate with your first love. So it could be a person, a thing, a hobby, whatever you think or you identify as your first love.
You know, that's a unique question. Unique question, and I want to take filial family love out of this. And you know, there's only been a few significant relationships, you know, where, and all of them I learned something from. And we're talking three over a couple of decades, right, that I really invested time and emotion and got to the point where we said I love you and all of that works. But as I come out of, you know, the last 4 years have been a very soul searching time for me, and one of the things that, and I'm working with a shrink and all of this stuff that comes with getting diagnosed with PTSD by the VA. But one of the things that we're kind of hacking through right now is love. And I don't know if I've ever loved anything. And I say that because I don't know if I've loved myself. And so, you know, the ironic thing behind it is I picked up this dog, Beans, about a year and a half ago. And I think I love Beans, you know. So that's a start, right? There's no price tag for her, you know, and you know, there's been some heart-stopping moments on, you know, by the road, what have you, that, you know, I'm not ready to live without Beans right now. So I think that I don't know. I mean, I'm 42 years old, just figuring out if I've ever loved before, and I know I've projected love, but never took the time to really understand what it means to myself. So not a not a really meaty response, but it's kind of
What about your first loss or heartbreak and how that felt? Whatever you associate as your first loss or heartbreak.
you know, instantly the first two things that come to mind are, one is near and dear to me, just like when it happened in 2009. And the other one is more selfish, emotional, based off of a girl I loved some years ago, right? And one was painful, and you know, the love, that pain dissipates. and the other one was in 2009 when a friend in 2009 in Kabul, Afghanistan. A good friend of mine, somebody that I would see every morning, Staff Sergeant Christosimos. We had breakfast, and then a couple hours later, he went out on mission, and he took a V-bid, and he died. And seeing that, and I was a driver myself, and having to drive back by that scene multiple times, it hurt. But at the time, I was going out the very next morning with my team right next to that spot. It was not a time to show emotion, so I buried it. And this was month 2 into a 7-month tour, I believe, 9-month, 7-month tour. Um, so I remember transferring to another base, another camp, some months later, and we built this new camp from the ground up. So it was tent city with porta potties every couple of blocks, and I used to always take my showers at night just because I didn't, you're only supposed to take 1-minute hot showers, and I kind of wanted to steal a couple. Yeah. But I remember going there at like 2 in the morning to take this shower, and it was just myself, and I'm sitting there, and I broke down, and it was just, it should have happened a long time ago. And so that was the hardest loss. But even then, I didn't deal with it right. I remember the night it happened, before going to bed, kind of diaring, what my raw thoughts were hours after the blast. And I signed off on, I know this is going to impact my life later on. And it took me 5 years to read it. And I read it, and I didn't acknowledge it then. And I think it wasn't until I ended my military service after 10 years in 2012. And I didn't make it 16 months before the demons came out, and I was one of those guys who I was done with the military. I wasn't telling anybody. It worked, that's over. We're shutting the door on that chapter. And, that set off another episode of my life that answered the question.
Yeah. So you said that initial loss of essentially losing a friend of yours and then compartmentalizing it, how did those demons manifest themselves?
So I had spent 10 years in the same, kind of underneath the same mentors, at an intelligence agency down in Maryland. And even when I got out in 2012, it was just a matter of one of those things where my military obligation ended on a Thursday. On Monday, I was back in working for a federal contractor, managing the same program, same mission. Didn't skip a beat, still very actively supporting the mission. This was back in 2013 to 15. 2015, I moved from DC area to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to reunite with a childhood friend, and then we had been seeing each other, and it was there, and I had planned everything. I mean, I had planned out, the job, the wages, the style of life, quality of life. But what I had not accounted for was going from DC to Tulsa, not knowing anybody there except her. And when I left the service, I still had an active clearance. and I had some high anxiety issues. But there's a fine line you tread on utilizing and retaining that clearance and living a lifestyle. Um, so I forget where I'm going with this. Oh, so there's anxiety. When I told him when I was doing the out processing, you go through the whole shrinks. I told him, I said, I got some weird anxiety here, and it was full on depression.
Yeah.
And that's when, I had been drinking, socially. I was very good at it. I was fun drunk. We don't take it from me, poll a dozen people that spent a couple of years with me in any given country. I mean, we had fun. But at some point, and this is, it's clear now, I went from social drinking to suppression drinking. I went from anxiety to depression. And in my mindset back then, depression didn't exist. Anxiety kept me sharp, and drinking, eh, I'm just doing a little bit more frequently now, So that was in retrospect, the red flags were there, but in Tulsa, there was this level of anxiety that was coming in. I was in a new environment, um, living with my girlfriend, and she was a great girl. And we talk, we've discussed what happened, but I didn't know what was going on in my mind, and I didn't want to put her through that. And what was also happening by now, um, and outwardly I'm doing very well, right? I landed a good job with a Fortune 50. I'm leading up a national nonprofit for local chapter. I'm teaching as an adjunct night classes at the local community college. I look really good on paper. I'm barely holding it together, right? We've migrated now from a nightly glass of wine to she's going to bed and I'm killing off another bottle with a couple of shooters. Um, and she doesn't know. I mean, if there's one thing I've found that I'm good at, and in retrospect, I guess a lot of alcoholics are, it's hiding my vices, and so she didn't have really a clue what was going on, other than I had some, mental despondencies. But it was in that period, and there was probably a sick, and never any alcohol issues, no, nothing criminal. I had maintained it at surface level. I mean, it was a storm boiling, behind a facade. But it broke, and I knew that I was going wide right. Um, I went on what was supposed to, well, we broke up, and I went on what was going to be a 3-day bender, and, it turned into, I don't know, 8 months. Going all Charlie Sheen and, quitting everything. And I still was, I knew I had a problem now, but I didn't care. The pain was I was fixing the pain daily. All I had to do was go to the liquor store. Um, and I didn't even care, knowing that this wasn't sustainable. I wasn't working. I was just drinking. I had one veteran buddy that would come in and check on me, and he's the one who kind of brought me back into the fold of I can't do this by myself. So he would come check on me, but yeah, I did a grand finale of an 18-day bender. My parents had to drive out from Colorado. They took me to a detox. The detox took one look at my vitals, said this ain't happening here. Immediately called an ambulance. This is all right on Thanksgiving week. Um, the ambulance takes me to the ER, and they put me in ICU for I think 4 days. I was hospitalized for 7, 8, and my parents are bedside, and I was first 3 days I was out. I developed some intestinal bleeding, and hell, I didn't even know alcohol was this dangerous. My parents didn't drink. Um, so yeah, then at this point they're telling me I'm an alcoholic. I need to go to rehab. My mother is on it, right? I mean, she's right back in that. She's got a deployed son. I'm fucking out there. Um, So she calls, works with my work, gets me on some type of temp disability or something. She's working with the VA. She gets me into a rehab center, so I drive back with them. I get released on Thanksgiving Day from the hospital. She's got everything lined up. We drive back on Saturday. We get to Denver. I'm on a short list, a wait list to go into a 30-day inpatient. She's got it all dialed out, and I'm not an alcoholic. I'm good. It was just a dip, right? So we're sitting around, and all the family's around, and it's like a full-on intervention. I have nothing to say. I can't talk my way out of this. This is for the first time in my life. I'm just going with the plan, and I don't want to. I'm waitlisted. I think it's a Saturday. I don't have a spot in the rehab place until the following Monday. It's like 9 o'clock at night. I get a phone call, and they say, "Hey, uh, if Carlos can be down here within 2 hours, we'll admit him." And I'm like, shit, you know? So, I embark on my first and so far last deployment to rehab. And that was an adventure. So I do 30 days inpatient, go through a couple of classes, put this all back together. And my parents want me to stay in Colorado. I've got shit I need to button up in Tulsa. I ain't having it. I go back to Tulsa. The job that my mother has worked, and they're holding it for me. I'm supposed to start back. I'm talking to HR. They said, yeah, we're not you. We're going to fire you. And I'd fire me too, So I had to own it. That was the first probably step of me owning it, but I wasn't prepared to own it. So I fucking relapsed. Didn't make it 24 hours. And I went on another, I think it was a 3-day kicker and 3-4 day bender, and I was now on a short leash. And they came out again, drove all the way out, got me, picked all of my shit up. I owned a house out there, and so I came back, and I was gonna, I had no clue what I was gonna do in Denver. I hadn't been back here in 17 years. And I spent a couple of nights with my sister. I still have a couple of dollars in the bank, so I say, well, I need to get a place. So I moved into this place, the Acoma, which was either the worst or the best decision. But this was just supposed to be a 6-month timeout. I figured it out, and I got it all together. I got a job with, well, won't tell you with who, right? But I got a job, and things were looking up. I came here to the Acoma because there was some community here. We met early on, and I think, a couple of guys that have some ties to the streets, I wondered, what the fuck's he doing here? And you probably wondered at some point, so what am I doing here? A couple of tatted up Mexicans at the pool. But, there's, I think, always the chit chat and the respect, and we built a relationship over the time. And that first year out of rehab, I left rehab in 2016. 2017 was an extremely pivotal year of not success, because I was still very much relapsing successfully, but the time between them was getting longer and longer. And I think it was in 18, I finally said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I got diagnosed with PTSD in 2018. Went through all that battery of tests with the VA. And I kept trying to get up and power through it and tell the world I got this. I didn't have shit. There was, and that's not the lowest point. The lowest point was in Tulsa. What was the question?
You were just you continue. The lowest point was
Yeah. The lowest point in Tulsa is when I was going at it, and in retrospect, this wasn't the first time that this thought had come across, but this was before I had embraced, that I may have an issue with PTSD. I think one of the things that military men and women have is I don't have it. That guy over there has it. Um, and so I was just suppressing the pain. I used alcohol. At that point, if it had been a pile of meth, I probably would have been done that. I was agnostic to the substance. I just wanted it to go away, and alcohol was readily available.
So, I mean, I think you said that to answer how did the demons manifest
Yeah.
from you not being able to properly process and grieve the incident, you know, in your deployment,
Yeah.
and that the demons ended up manifesting themselves through, you know, alcohol abuse.
Well, that's what invited him out to play,
Yeah.
and and I don't, in retrospect, having gone through. You're looking at someone that's gone through, an intensive 3 years of soul searching with help,
Mm-hmm.
therapists, psychiatrists, a whole new line of mentors. You having this, being comfortable in this environment. So I don't think it was just Sergeant Christosomos dying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was I was brought up in Logan Heights. I think that it was me, all of that. And there's plenty of people that grew up to
Together.
single mothers and in the Vadio, that did successful, that didn't take the path I did. I think it was me, it was ego. I didn't know when to reach out until I had to. So you hear this statistic about, at least if you follow the veteran community, there's an alarming statistic out there where 22 veterans take their life a day, by suicide. And at that point, I wasn't really following the veteran community. I did have a sticker that someone had passed to me at a VA, the veteran 1-800 veteran crisis line, and it was on my fridge. And by this point, I was drinking pretty heavily, and it's normal to walk around in a bathrobe with a pistol and a bottle of whiskey, right? you know. So you hear about this statistic, 22 a day, and I like to think that in November of 2016, there's a day where only 21 committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was at that point, and I don't know why, but I called that number.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a young Navy vet that spent an hour or so on the phone with me, um, that talked some sense into me. And to this day, I'm an advocate of that number. It works,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, so even then, I couldn't admit to myself that there was a suicide attempt. Um, and I never told anybody until 3 years ago. I told my shrink, and it was liberating. And it was liberating to find out that I'm not alone. And it was liberating to find out that, as you look at me on paper, I've overcome a lot of challenges. And I thought, as I put some sobriety between me and the incident, if I buckled, who else? And that's what caused me, and I couldn't help anybody until I could help myself. And throughout this last 4 years, I've reached a state of mental acceptance where I'm actively helping other people and still receiving help. Um, that I embarked on this mission to help veterans. Um, Not any veteran. I mean, there's plenty of veterans out there that don't want to help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just one person, and I help veterans. And what I realized, and even my, the company I'm a part of has a mission focused on creating a work environment where veterans and civilians can come together. Um, but as I was putting this kind of plan together to help veterans, I thought, wait, there's only one veteran that I'm truly looking to save, and that's me.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I can't save me by myself. So I was fortunate enough to grab a couple other veterans that had been through the muck with me and they're on my team, and that just, we created a big Ponzi scheme of veterans, kind of like what you're doing, of veterans that know they're on thin ice, right? And it's kind of like, if you can latch on to me, and next thing I know, I've got this network of 9 of us, and I'm like, shit, God have mercy if we all go crazy at the same time. But no, it's there's no finer mind than a disciplined military mind. At the same time, there's no more destructive element than a military mind in a state of despondency, and I've seen that firsthand. Um,
Who would you say? And I know we talked about love earlier, how you're on the journey of discovering that. And one of the questions is, who would you say first taught you love, or the closest thing to it, and how? How did you get taught that? It can be anything.
and I want to take my family side out of this because, like I said, I came from a very loving family. All of us siblings support each other. We've all, supported each other through our ups and downs, and that's one of the things that really got me through it was having that support group. But I would say, and I don't know, I mean, it was my last girlfriend. Excuse me. And why did she love me? Is what I would think is that, I'm no easy walk in the park, and I gave her everything I can. We never had any, verbal or physical abuse. It was a very loving relationship. But how do you deal with somebody that's silently fighting the demons in his head and he don't even know really what they are? The extreme anxiety, and by this point in 2015, 14, it was riding high. She didn't know how to cope with it. So, and come to find out, just in December, the VA diagnosed me with ADHD. So in a matter of 4 years, I find out I got PTSD, depression, extreme anxiety, I'm an alcoholic, and I got ADHD. And the first thing that they tell me is, we got these pills.
Yeah.
And so we're going through them and how they're a scheduled drug. And I'm thinking, have you seen my profile? I'm an addict. And you're trying to give me, the way you guys are describing it, speed. And I said, I don't want it. I said, at least let me work this through, because the way I see it, outside of some significant outliers, I've been very creative in being successful. And when I got that ADHD, and I'm still processing it now, it was liberating. That I'm not dumb. I've just got a different way of thinking, and that's what never made sense. Was I would look around. Sometimes I would have to look around at the people that were accepting my counsel or my advice, and think, they're freaking brilliant. They're very smart. They've got it together. They're still reaching out to me. Like, that was my mark of my own internal sanity. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm dealing with that now. I don't want to take any pills. I'm in a position to where, as leading this work team, I've been very open and transparent with them. I just want to try and live a life without getting more pills pumped into me, and I, there's no shortage of examples of successful people living with ADHD and not taking the drugs.
Can you describe just a moment of high anxiety?
Yeah, yeah. And since I had anxiety, I recognized my anxiety at a young age professionally, 18, 19. And I remember at that age, it would sideline me. The shakes, the, hyperventilating, just have to remove myself. So I kind of innately and naturally took this at a young age, this stoic approach, and if you look at, I said it earlier, I was an extensive reader, the genres I focus on as I look back, it kind of, the myriad of books I've read have centered around psychology, philosophy, leadership, so those, you figure I've read 1,000 books and 60% of them are centered around those. I think that those really channeled my ADHD, my anxiety, but they also, whereas in my 20s and late 20s, into my 30s, I managed to suppress the external feels by just doing a flatline face. I'd smile on command, but for the most part, you didn't know where I was at, and I mastered that, especially as I advanced in senior leadership positions. Just the stoic face, and if they only knew what was churning behind the mask, if you will.
Can you describe that churning?
Yeah, I mean, that's where my body wants to go. And I think that there's a direct connection that I'm working through on my anxiety and my ADHD. Mm-hmm. So my mind, as I learn and I work with professionals on how an ADHD mind works, I mean, it's just all over the place, right? And it's going out and bringing back all of these data points into a central point, and I'm making decisions on the fly. The anxiety side, when it would swell up and there's no more visible effects, but it's now sending out these receptors all over the place, and it's coming back with a lot of fucking very good thoughts, and I got to pick one now. And I think that's as I got older how it manifested is, I always called myself the 80% solution. And I was able to successfully deal with ADHD because I had the luxury of having a very good staff and team that would kind of, without discussing, just knowing that they liked me, but I was like I always called myself the 80% solution because I had a very solid team that would kind of.
What's a general good day for you? Just quickly describe, like, man, if you look back, like, man, this was a good day.
Back then or now?
Now.
Now is a good day. I'm up at 5. I'm having a cup of coffee. She don't get up till about 7. So I'm making breakfast. And one of the things that I've realized with the ADHD is I have to have a regimented schedule. So from 5 o'clock to about 7 o'clock, I have to keep it packed to keep my mind busy. But a good day is waking up. I'm hitting my schedule. Going to the gym. I look at, if I don't exercise, read, and find fulfillment in the work that I'm doing, and that's not every day, but if it's like a series of days goes on, it's not a good day.
So then the next question is, can you tell me about a bad day and how you push through that bad day so they don't become weak?
Yeah. The life of an entrepreneur in COVID era, finding out, kind of recently that you're an alcoholic with major depression, there was a lot of bad days, that I just wanted to stay in bed. But as an entrepreneur for the last 3 years, my back's against the wall. Yeah. So there's a little bit of, and I think that's just the grit and gumption and ambition that goes back to 1,000 books and good families and good mentors was, I got to get up. In this past, I would drink, and it's amazing how fast the day goes by if you pop a bottle at 8 in the morning. You're very fast, yeah. And why stop there? So a good day now is, and I've had a lot more. And these are one of the things that I share with my shrink, who I meet with every Saturday morning. Is I said, man, I've been putting, knock on wood, a lot of good days together. And I said the anxiety is still there, the stress is still there, but the hope, is there's excitement about, being 50 There's excitement about, I've got a team of very talented minds that have put together, and that kind of, and that's one thing too. That's another aspect is when I left the military, I swore I would never assume a position of leadership again, where people would believe in me, because I let a lot of people down. And as I put this company together, I tried very hard to give out the top spot to somebody else. But with kind of my vision, the culture that I'm going after, and I kind of took it by, I took it on myself, and now I'm leading a team of 7 people, and I take that position of leadership very serious. I've seen what bad decisions do, and maybe that's something I'll live with, but I always take it back to the worst case scenario. A bad decision from an ineffective leader is either going to kill somebody or it's going to fuck them up mentally. And that's from 4 deployments that I'm thinking that way, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. And that's kind of what brought in this whole concept of bringing military mindsets and civilian mindsets together. You look at all these, there's a lot of corporates out there that want to hire vets with PTSD. And they have this grand program, and they go out and they hire whatever 2-star that did a last stint at the Pentagon, and they've got a very nice brochure-like program. And I've been through one of those programs with the Fortune 50. And when I told them, when I got diagnosed with PTSD, it's something that, how do you tell anybody, right? So I kind of put it out there, that, hey, this is something I'm dealing with. Well, there's no really networks of confidant in the corporate world, and it wasn't long before that got out that, and I've always kind of just been, just going to give it to you raw, there's no need for me to bullshit you, I'm confident in my level of intellect and where it is, and more importantly, where it isn't, so I always own whatever decision I and whatever suggestion I say. But I remember that there was a meeting and someone was being way out of hand, and on how they were acting and what they were saying, and I called him out. And I called him out directly. And then next thing I know, I'm in HR, because it whipped around that I was having a PTSD episode. And I was thinking, you got to be kidding me. Anybody else, they just didn't have the courage to do that. This person was out of line, and everybody knew that. So at that point, and I'm thinking, I got to defend that this isn't PTSD, it's just, but I was done with corporate. Sure, I don't think I lasted in corporate America another 3 months after that, and I left. So that's why I say to these companies that want to hire veterans and they want to advertise hiring veterans with PTSD, know what you're getting into. And you need a fucking different type of HR, and you need one, to create a culture where seeking help is okay, right? And until that culture is created, and I don't know if it can be, but fuck if I'm not going to try, we're going to continue to have this problem.
What's inspired you and why?
Before I hit rock bottom, my inspirations were more ego-based and facade, Pick any person that you can Google, get a lot of accolades, It wasn't Gandhi. And I think now that, and I think this is indicative across the board for any man or woman that bottoms out, and that's different to every person. But if you can, if you bottom out and you're at that point where you're really doing a check if you want to stick around, and you got to realize, at least with veterans, there's death and there's honor in death. And then it's probably not just veterans, but speaking from my community, that if you find a way to pick yourself back up And it could take years. It's taken me years. But if you find yourself a way to pick back up, address the problem, don't put a band aid over it, nothing scares you. Nothing scares me, because I got back up with this, blessed to have the same work ethic, the same moral compass, and there ain't a whole lot there, but what's there is fucking there, and
Amen.
people fucking still believe in me. And I am the CEO of a company with a lot of growth potential. And I think I'm not the poster child for this. And how does this end? And I said, you know what? We'll figure that out. Because the network I have around me, the mentors, the people I have around me, I can't fail. I won't fail.
What's been the most humbling experience for you?
I think embracing humility has been a big one for me.
What are some of the things you do to actively embrace humility?
I think that's a question, better posture to perhaps say my teams or people that work with me, but I would say that, and this just goes to, my life in the military and great leaders there and 1,000 books, but taking leadership seriously is, I lead by example. It's not always a good example, but I lead by it, and I let people know that, hey, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to own them. And I think it's just that, like, leading without ego, and it's by far the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do. I mean, living without ego as an entrepreneurial and just selling your vision and your spirit and your enthusiasm was easy, right? But every entrepreneur wants to be successful and have 1,000 people working for them. With that comes, it's a whole lot harder to be humble, So I think that's the true test. Let's say that we meet my vision as a team, and I'm, in a position to where it's kind of a social experiment that I'm putting on myself to make sure that the leading without ego, the humility in life and living stays constant. And I hope it does, but there's a whole lot of things that I didn't predict or plan for, such as doing 30 days inpatient.
Go in your mind and think. This life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Tell me about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war.
With the word war? I think it's an unnecessary word. I think as a young recruit, and on the first deployment, I was very excited about it. Taking the pictures, and it only takes one. So I look at war as I look at it now, and I look at it as it's so unnecessary. There's somebody out there said it's a lot easier to honor the dead than care for the wounded. And it is. You look at these veterans that are coming out with problems, and yes, the VA is out there, but there are still significant bottlenecks, and it's in that duration of trying to get help where a lot of them they're no longer willing to fight. And I think that is what is the most unnecessary component of war. It's easy to factor in the upfront cost. You know, how much money is so and so going to make off the next, off this war. But where's the ledger light item for dealing with the after effects? You think about statistically, we had been at war for over 20 years. We cycled over, I think, 1.5 million young men and women between the ages of 18 and 25. Where are they now? That's what I want to know. Yeah, where are they gonna be? Because they should be hitting their prime right now. And I'll tell you where 11 of them are, and that's my network. That I've established here in Denver. Some of them are doing good, some of them aren't. So that's what I've found is, and you've got all these great campaigns and slogans, and I don't want to take away from them. But at the end of the day, it's just one veteran calling another veteran, and if they connect, you probably have a friendship for life right there because they need each other.
So same type of question. Go in your mind and think. This life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. What about a time that you can relate to the word peace?
I want to go to mental peace, and I look back after kind of tiptoeing through the last 4 decades of my life, and I've never willfully sought mental peace or even knew how to describe it. But I will say, after all kind of what I'd been through, and it manifesting over the last 5 years, and then getting diagnosed with ADHD. And I remember even when they told me, yeah, it's positive. I'm like, fucking bring it, you know. But doing some self-research and talking to some professionals and just sitting there one day on the end of my bed thinking, I got this. I've been focusing on the wrong shit. I just need to figure out my mind. It operates this way for a reason, and it's been telling me for a long time now that when it goes into overload, it's gonna melt. So I come from a family of my mother was very religious, growing up. So ADHD, I remember growing up when I was 5 or 6, and it was very popular. The pills were coming out, and my mother didn't believe in that. God wouldn't make an imperfect mind. So never talked about it. We just powered through it, right? In retrospect, I mean, we've had the discussions about it, and that's one of the things that I was talking to my shrink was, I want to talk to my mother about some of these things, but I'm not doing it for animosity. I'm not blaming her for anything. There's things I want to know. Why don't I remember a lot of my childhood memories? It's that's something that I'm currently working on. But yeah, it's just liberating. I was at peace, knowing that I feel like that was the missing component for self-actualization, and me now knowing that, all right, I feel like that was the missing piece. Hell or high water, let's go after these dreams.
Right. Was part of the peace knowing that you're not alone, that a bunch of other people have the same thing, and it's actually very common.
Well, the peace came with knowing that it can either be used as kind of a sixth sense if channeled properly, or it could be very destructive. Every decision I've made, and in the last 4 years, as I've kind of put this little thing I'm working on together, every decision, and especially as my mind has been operating with clarity, has come with more risk and responsibility should it go awry. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I didn't plan, to to go all Charlie Sheen. I didn't plan to go to rehab. Usually in my life, I'm someone with a contingency plan for everything. I did not see that one coming. I was not prepared for it. And so I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. I saw the shrinks, I read the books, quit drinking. I was going to the AA meetings. But I still felt like, this ain't enough security, man. This could still happen again. Granted, driving by a liquor store is a whole lot easier, and I find ways to pass idle time, and headspace is a wonderful thing, and getting beans, but I still felt that there was a significant probability of my life getting turned upside down because I didn't understand the entire landscape. I do now, and it was that last ADHD. The huge component on cognitive action to reaction physically. There's a link there, I guess, is what they're telling me. So I think there's a zest for life. There's a zest for back in the day, just coming out of the military, I wanted to be a VP of a Fortune 500 company. Fuck. Why?
What about if you could tell us or expand a little bit more about what you would consider to be the truly most difficult time in your life, how that time in your life felt as you were going through it, and how you endured through that time?
I think that would be, and here's the deal too, I'm sure you've talked to a number of veterans, and there's some, instantly, 3 episodes jumped up, and 2 of them were deployments, incidences. But then, I quickly realized that we were ready, we were prepared, So I think, and we were all going to go through it together. So I think, kind of surprisingly, and this is the first time I'm putting these thoughts together, it was 2017. Knowing I was an alcoholic, knowing I wasn't ready to go give up on alcohol, but telling everybody around me that I had, relapsing, on the continuum, and genuinely wanting to not drink and to be a better person, to understand where these conflicting thoughts were coming from, so, and still being driven by ego. I think, you and I kind of crisscrossed some roads. I could have easily, reached out to you, and not realizing that there's a lot of people that think they have it together out here that are alcoholics. And that's one of the things that, with me, anything dramatic in my life, I take some time to kind of do my own research on it, and just realizing that there's a lot of people out there that are going through this, and it's a problem, and it's so much easier when you own it than when you don't. I mean, and I think that was hard too when dating or meeting new friends. The first thing someone wants to do is offer you a drink. So I had to restructure my total social life and responses. And I'm like, it's like a social experiment. So I kind of came up with this combination where I now, kind of casually, jokingly, I deny it. And then inevitably be a second one. And by the third one, I just say, I'm an alcoholic. And a lot of times people don't know how to deal with that. But surprisingly, I've had a number of people double back and be like, so when did you know you were an alcoholic, and how do you handle it so well and so openly? And I say, have you ever Googled it? Says, if you have, that's a good start. If you're Googling, am I an alcoholic? You probably are. Or I hear this one a lot. I only drink to go to bed. I say, yeah. You're at the beginning. So I think, 2017, fighting nothing except ego, and doing that alone, knowing that I had some significant mental issues, but not ready to address that, knowing that.
How exactly do you fight the ego?
I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
It was ripped from me. I'm broke. I'm an
So
alcoholic.
you're more so not even fighting. Your ego was shattered,
It was
and you
shattered. It was taken from me.
so you got to build from the ground up.
And so that's why I say, yeah, building from the ground up, realizing, and I stayed there on the bottom for a while. Um, yeah, I stayed there for a while, but in retrospect, I really found out about myself there. The easy part for me too is what I did not do is jump into another relationship, and I'm no Tom Cruise, but it wasn't like there was a shortage of
Right.
supply. But I knew that if I did, it would you know how it is. You strike up all these emotions, everything's perfect for 9 months until it's not. All I did was put a 9 month band-aid on an issue. And in retrospect now, I'm still not actively dating. How do I go up to somebody, and just like we were talking about, we had to learn how to socially interact with people.
Yeah.
And that's part of ego too,
Yeah.
because right away, I'm thinking, oh, you know, are they judging me? But now I can look back and I know that person who downed 3 martinis in an hour, they're worse off than me. At least I'm open with it because I know where that's going. I can pick out an alcoholic,
Right.
pretty
Easily.
quick now. Yeah. And it's not, it's more of a,
Do you find it in its own way kind of liberating that you have no choice but to be yourself? You can't be anyone else because we can't mask it with drinking anymore. We can't keep the facade and keep the ego alive with the drugs and alcohol. So you have no choice but to be you.
yeah. And look at, even this is the case in point of how do I live without the ego? And that's a good question I'll ponder on after this. Every day, uh, probably every day, it's pretty consistently, I find myself telling my story to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like telling my story. I don't want to be known for kind of, that era.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it works.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. 10 years from now, I want to allude to it, to someone younger that's going through it or older, but I don't want to be known for it. I definitely am on a path where I can put some better causes between now and then. But I think for me right now is it's going on record, owning it, making it to where I can never hide from it. And that's, we kind of casually discussed on the parameters of this, what is this all about? Where is it going? Because there's a lot of people out there that will use something, vulnerability like this, against you. And I think you had a pretty direct response. Who cares? So that tells me that, even putting that question to you, I still have a little bit of and we all have it, that ego that,
Oh
I
yeah.
still got
I
to
mean,
stomp on every once in a while.
it's scary to be vulnerable. It's not easy,
No,
but that's the
no.
only way you're your authentic self. Is you open yourself up and you're vulnerable because people can hurt you. That's why you don't have the shield, but that's where the strength is. Because hey, that's more indicative of that person than it is of you. No one likes to see a person kick a dog when he's down,
Yeah,
or kick a person when they're open.
yeah.
That's just where they're at.
And I think, one of the things on that was like, how do I mitigate that? And I'm thinking, well, who do I have in my life that's close enough to me to do something like that?
Yeah.
You know? And if they're there, they made themselves known, let's work on that and eliminate that situation. So yeah, now it's just, thinking pragmatically, like you said, of all my life and of all of the accolades and whatever I have on paper, your professional resume that you build up, and the greatest help that has come to me has been in this time of being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And this story that I tell, and this is just my story, we all have our own, that I tell, and I remember the first time I told it, the first time I had said that, yeah, I wasn't too keen on sticking around this world anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had to come to facts with why I didn't want to stick around anymore. And interestingly enough, people that I tell my story to, and I think you're one of them, I'm thinking that I'm starting to see a trend on people that ask this question. So they'll say, "Why didn't you do it?" And that had sent me down on a road of why didn't I do it? And I've given out several responses, and one of them was, I don't know what that dude on the other line said. Another one was, I wouldn't do it drunk. Or I'm too fucking smart for this. You know, I can figure this out. So at the end of the day, what is my quest? It's fucking happiness,
Right.
tranquility.
Right.
If I got to build a fucking corporation to get there, I will. There is no desire to be a CEO of a company for a long time. Because with that burden of leadership comes a lot of sleepless nights. So I want to do it. I want to get this started off. And 5, 8 years from now, I'm handing it off. And to pursue a purpose of passion,
you said there's a few things that, because really being on the brink of suicide and you to the point where you picked up the phone and dialed and you talked to somebody about what you were going through. One, those numbers work. Talking to people work.
Yeah.
Talking to people saves lives. It's that simple, and it is pretty important. But
could you imagine if no one answered that phone line? You know?
you got, yeah. Right? And it's serious.
To this day, I still sometimes call that line.
Yeah.
Just to say, hey guys, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am.
Yeah, and they're doing the good work. But I think I wanted to harken to the point of, why didn't you do it, right? Because that's what I think too. Why didn't I kill myself, right? And I didn't call a hotline. I cried out to God, and it's the same as calling a hotline.
A better hotline.
Right? But it wasn't that I wanted to kill myself. For me personally, it was that I just didn't know how to live with all the pain. I didn't know how to live with, the depression, the anxiety. I was like, if this is going to be life, I was fighting every day just to make it through the day.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I would wake up, it would just be, oh, fuck, I woke
24
up.
hours.
Like, man, I woke up again. Like, when is this going to be over? And I've always been a fighter, and I'm sure you have as well, but that mental battle just tears down your ego.
I was weary too.
Yeah, it broke you down.
Yeah.
I had the biggest ego too.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't have the on the paper accolades. I had other accolades.
I seen them. I think me and Terry Fitch sitting out there on that. You come in looking rough. I'd look at Terry and be like, I don't know about old Jose.
Right? And that whole time, like the mental battle, I was like, no, I want to live, but if this is life, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And then I called my hotline, you called your hotline, and letting it out and just telling someone listening with no judgment. It's like, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I think. Maybe they're like, you get that little bit of hope, right?
Yeah, it's spot on, and that's what I say too. It's after all I'd been through, deployed 4 times, and the closest I come to death is a bottle and at my own hand.
Yeah.
The fuck?
Doesn't make sense, right?
That makes no damn sense.
But it's real.
And again, right then on that very moment that day went down, on paper, if the news would have got a hold of it, they'd be like, it don't make sense. It was, it makes 100% sense. In retrospect, the red flags were there. Mm-hmm. They were blaring, the sirens were blaring. And I think as I really analyzed this last 4 years, and it goes well beyond that. I can pick out those indicators. And as I sit down and I talk to younger vets, people in that 1.5 million group that are brilliant, but no one understands them, right? Or they're still, a lot of the younger ones that I interact with, the ego's still very much there.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you tell somebody that was at the top of their game, uh, trained in the best manner possible, and had life or death at their fingertips, that they ain't cutting it out here at 8 to 5?
It's a transition that's hard.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
That transition is not happening. It's a problem. And I'm tired of lip service, so, and I joined several some of the veteran service organizations and I don't want to knock anybody that gives any type of energy to helping veterans, but there's a generational gap in how we need to treat these younger veterans. You go into a older VFW, American Legion, they're going to offer you alcohol, they're going to offer you beer, and all of that jazz, and we need to hit a refresh button. There's a couple of groups out there that are doing kind of. I'm excited to see, and I would, there's different groups that I want to team up with that I think they're more focused on today's needs. And what's also liberating and very encouraging is I'm one of many people that have been here. I mean, you need only go on YouTube, and TEDx veterans telling their story on TEDx. It's powerful. Listening to those TEDx talks on veterans dealing with PTSD, depression, suicide got me through life. And if I'm ever in a position to host a TEDx talk here in Denver and invite some of those ones that come back, or we collab on that, and it's on my roadmap, I will. Because, if I could do nothing more than shake some of these and I can list their names out, shake their hand, because they have no clue, the impact that they had on me and I'm sure many other people. So yeah, it's.
What about if you can tell us about what you would say is the most joyous moment in your life and how that felt?
I don't know if I've felt that yet. You know, uh, I think it's coming. I think a lot of the challenges that I used to be proud of and a lot of the accomplishments I were proud of, I was proud of them for the wrong reason. Um, I think I'm joyful to be here in a position telling this story. Uh, and it's hope. I think the joy is in the hope. That's now, like you said, what was a bad day? A fucking good day is intoxicating. That's my new high. And that's just, what we all want is hope. We're on this world for what? You found passion in this. The return on investment for something like this is it's not monetized, but it's, you know. So this is a period of joy that's not natural, that I think a lot of people would not understand if you hadn't been to the bottom.
For me, since I think our stories are similar in some ways, um, certainly in the sobriety journey, um, when I first got started the sober journey, which there's always relapses in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I remember feeling, I hadn't had a clear mind in close to 10 years.
Yeah, dude, it's amazing, huh?
And I remember calling my sister and I was like, I didn't know how to deal with not feeling like shit all the time because I wasn't used to feeling anything, then feeling good. Like I couldn't, I was like, man, when am I was, I told my sister, I'm like, it feels like too good to be true. I gotta pinch myself. Like I might get hit by a fucking bus tomorrow. You know what I mean? Right? And you know what she told me? She was like, it is true. Enjoy it. This is how life was always supposed to be.
And here's the thing, I've never been poorer in my life than I am now.
Yeah.
But never more joyful
Right.
because of hope. And where, all lights are green on the way forward. And I think that's what it's all about. And in the past, yeah, I had wanted to live a life gauged by the monetary.
Right.
Making money's easy, If all I wanted was money, I promise you it wouldn't be the legalities of the law holding me back from making it.
What would you say keeps you up at night?
Red Bull.
Yeah.
I think that, and I'm coming to grips with this on the whole work-life balance. And,
Yeah.
I feel like there was 6 years of my life that I lost out on. So now it's especially the mind of an ADHD person. I've got all types of great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them can I truly execute on?
Right.
So I think that has a component of it. Yeah,
What keeps you going every day?
people that believe in me. I mean, that's it, to be honest. I mean, if it was just me trying to
Yeah.
fight against this world on my own, you can't do it. You can't go alone in this world. I'm not saying you need to be married and have kids. You have to have someone you can open up to. The way society is built today, if you try and go it alone, you'll fail.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
As I came out of recovery, and I think it hit me most when I was relapsing. And I felt that there was a point there that I was relapsing because of guilt from a myriad of different instances and environments. And I was going through the steps, and I had to make amends with everybody, or whatever that one is called for. And I said,
Jeez.
I don't even fucking remember. I'm not doing this. It's fucking unnecessary, right? And so I wrestled with that rhetoric and logic for a while, and finally I came to this moment, and there was some people that definitely were impacted by my lifestyle, and in retrospect, I regretted it. There were some I definitely made amends to. There's others that I came to a point, and this was some years ago when I started this journey, was I'm done owning regret, right? I've told people sorry. If they don't accept it, what else do I do? So, and I said, for me to morally and mentally get behind that and be at peace with it, I had to adjust my lifestyle, to a way that is, you call somebody up, and it's an alcoholic calling a friend up saying, hey, I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. Well, they've heard that before, right? So it was like my words were, the currency of my words and rhetoric were devalued, and my actions were suspect. So I had to just put all right, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. 4 years later, I'm still doing it, and I'm right here. So for me, this is just another reaffirmation of I'm on the right path.
So you're alive and well. Any regrets that you may have brought up, do you feel that you can change or be at peace with them in general?
I'm at peace with everything that I've ever done in life because I can logically understand it. Strike that. There was some nights out there that they blacked out. Pretty sure I offended some people, and I'm sorry if you see this. Um, just, you know, we're aging. It's probably another reason why we had to give up that lifestyle. It's not fucking sustainable. Um, and I'm happy to have the good fortune to have dipped that low and be in a position to respect and learn from it.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid, or the lack thereof. What are your dreams now?
I'm building a corporation called, I built it, Parachute Group Corporation. My professional background has been in senior levels of program management focused on technology and the financials. I did very well at it. I get a master's degree in it, and very involved in the industry and the discipline. And I was making, corporate America was paying me quite handsomely for it, but just wasn't doing it for me. It wasn't turning my crank. So I started I started my own company about 3 years ago, focused on providing project management services. Long story short, I want to create this environment where veterans and industry mindsets can come together to just create solutions, and then there's this, and I'm not just saying veterans need shrinks, civilians need too. And I think that we can both benefit from this. In that, if civilians, what's the proper term? If civilians see veterans that have been through the muck sticking their hand up and talking about casually, I'm going to see my therapist. Well, that gives them a pass to go do the same damn thing, right? And that's it. How do you eliminate the egos? You make it uncool. So I want to see an environment where, that could happen. I have a vision of something, Parachute Academy, where we train, a lot of veterans to go through this, kind of life after service, and for some people it takes longer. They may need to stay in this program for a couple of years, but they're growing, they're building, they're learning. When we exit the military, there's like a 5-day class, and they teach us how to put a proper belt on, and you don't have to wear boots and shit like that. We need more of that, and I think that it's creating that environment, even if it's just for a year, right? And I can say I contributed, I did my part, and at the end of the day, you look back at it, it's just leaving whatever little legacy I can. I've got 7 nieces and nephews. Some of them know me as Drunk Uncle, and as they should. And I make sure to this day, that I still bring it up. Uncle Carlos doesn't get whiskey at Christmas, and they know why, right? I get cider. But I've got 7 nieces and nephews at this point. It's only a matter of time. You play the probabilities. One of them's going to go through his addiction of one way or another.
Where do you see your company going in the next 2 to 3 years?
Public. IPO.
You're the co-author of your life book. If you could envision what your picture perfect scenic ending would look like.
I don't know. Death don't scare me.
Right.
Bring it.
So, for example,
Like, what am I? Like, am I married with the kids?
Yeah, like that. Like it's the ending of the book, not the ending of
It's rather ominous. I haven't even given thought to that. I got too much to accomplish.
Right.
I hit me up in a couple of weeks or something, but there was a time it was going to end in a bathrobe, a whiskey bottle, and a handgun. It's that
Now, how can you see it ending
much more blissful.
now?
Hopefully beans will stick around.
Yeah.
I'm not ruling out marriage, but that probability is slipping by the year. But, who knows? Maybe, everything is on the table if it'll bring peace and harmony to me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at now. I mean, I was the man who read books on why not to get married, and then I spring it is how I'm at now. I'll handle it as it comes.
That's it.
Is that it?
How do you like it?
You put me on point, man. I don't know if I'm gonna sleep tonight.